So you want to live in 1984 again, but not the year, the book.
Greetings, program!
Okay, in all seriousness, not 1984, not the Ministry of Truth, although some call it that. The Department of Homeland Security is now setting up a Disinformation Governance Board to stop disinformation, and we are expected to just sit back and take it. I don't know, but when I sit there and think about it, how are they able to get away with this? This is clearly a violation of the First Amendment. 1, a citizen's right to free speech. 2, the freedom of the press. We used to have a history of having citizen journalism, citizen publications. While printing presses weren't cheap, they weren't overly expensive either, and people were able to, again, mostly wealthy landowners, but enough people were able to get them, they were able to create their own newspapers. They were able to print and release the news. That's part of the reason why news got around so fast during the Revolutionary War. That being said, as time progresses on and we move into the Industrial Revolution and everything, we see fewer and fewer publications getting either one bought out or destroyed by their bigger competition because they can't afford to buy these huge mass printing presses that we are used to hearing and seeing about these days, with the publication of newspapers like the Seattle Times, the Olympian, Washington Post, which is the article I'm kind of looking at here, New York Post, New York Times, etc. These companies have mass printing presses that I don't have the ability to go against. However, we are seeing a rise in digital media. That is to say, we are seeing a rise in digital citizen media, such as Timcast, the Daily Wire, the Young Turks, Steven Crowder, H3H3, all these different podcasts and various sites have their ability to, 1, make videos, 2, make edited post-context, post-millennial, things like that. We are able to challenge or side with the narrative that we choose to side with. We are able to decide which media is okay, which media, well, I won't say which media is okay, which is not, but, we're able to peruse various media and see if it conforms with what mainstream media is telling us, or maybe mainstream media is hiding something from us. We won't know unless there's more journalism. But with that comes the caveat of, making sure that we are all operating on similar grounds. Some of what the Professional Society of Journalism do, the Society of Professional Journalism's ethics, as just one example of things to do. So let's go over and talk about the news story itself, which is the uproar over Homeland Security's Disinformation Governance Board, written by Aaron Blake of the Washington Post, and I've got it here on MSN.com. The Department of Homeland Security's creation of the Disinformation Governance Board has set off a backlash on the right. It's not just the right. There are those of us that are left-leaning that are not conservative, but also value the right to free speech and the right for us to say things that might be considered disinformation at a time. The government is not meant to propagandize to us, and the media is not meant to propagandize to us to an extent. Obviously, a certain wartime, look at what Disney did during World War II, etc. That being said, Secretary Mayorkas mentioned the creation of the board in multiple congressional hearings this week. In one, he linked to an effort to combat misinformation from human smugglers. In another, he said he would use it to counter Russian cyber and election misinformation. Quote, "We have just established a Mis- and Disinformation Governance Board in the Department of Homeland Security to more effectively combat this threat. not only to election security, but to our homeland security, end quote. Amid a growing anti-censorship fervor on the right and a bevy of Republicans who have suggested that the initiative amounts to policing speech, Elon Musk declared it, quote, messed up, end quote, and many on the right liken it to the, quote, Ministry of Truth, end quote, from George Orwell's book, 1984. I'm not going to quote the book title. We all know what it is. They've also questioned the fitness of the board's executive director, Nina Jankowicz, who in the past supported Democrats, praised the efforts to crack down on corona misinformation on social media, and expressed skepticism about the provenance of the Hunter Biden laptop. Quote, rather than police our border, the Homeland Security has decided to make policing American speech its top priority, end quote, says Senator Josh Hawley of Missouri claimed. And this is really all the bit of the story I need for this, is that I don't know if necessarily the governance board is here to police my speech or your speech. However, if I were to say something that counters the common accepted, how do I want to say this? Accepted narrative of a news story or a topic, I could, in theory, be punished by the Department of Homeland Security on this. That being said, they could just say that my information I got was from Russian agents and therefore can't be trusted. When in fact I might get my information from directly seeing somebody quote something in the news or on C-SPAN or something. You know, that's the thing about misinformation, is it's only misinformation if we accept it to be misinformation, or that it is fundamentally proven to be misinformation. Because believe it or not, the U.S. government commits misinformation just as much as Russia does. We go into other countries and we try to topple regimes in as quiet as possible means. And how do we do that? We invade via cyber attacks. We invade via propaganda. So does Russia. So does China. So does most every nation. So it doesn't make it right. It sure as heck doesn't make it right for anybody to be doing it just because the others are doing it. But at the same time, you don't get to sit there and say, oh, well, we need this to protect our citizens from the disinformation. How about we go back to teaching media literacy in schools? Not just college level, high school, junior high level, media literacy. How about we teach our children how to understand what it is that they're seeing on not just the news, the mainstream, what they're seeing from their favorite YouTubers, what they're seeing from their favorite TikTokers and whatnot. How that there is an underlying message into these videos. My underlying message here is that I value your free speech and your ability to talk. I value your right to be your own citizen journalist. I value your right to be part of the press and have that freedom to report on things. That being said, you also have the right to be sued when you make false claims. You have the right to be sanctioned and sued for being liable and slanderous, just like any media institution does. That's the thing. You have to judge when you are going into these, when you're trying to foray into media. Are you willing to report honestly and accurately, or are you just going to spin whatever comes to your mind? I could go into depth about how Nina Jankowicz has said stuff about the Hunter Biden laptop being Russian propaganda or a Trump campaign, tool, whatever. But we know that it's been proven accurate. We know that the New York Post article was accurate and it was banned because it was an inconvenience to the Democratic election process, or not the Democratic election, the Democrats' election. That being said, if we would actually just teach our people, teach everybody to understand how to spot, and not just spot, but understand when somebody is actually trying to manipulate you into believing their message in a less than honest way, how to spot it and be like, oh, well, here you go. Here's the message. Like I said, I try to be, with myself at least, as transparent as possible. That doesn't mean that I might present my message and it might come across in a way that somebody might find wrong. They might find I'm trying to manipulate people. I try not to, but at the same time, I have to recognize that there is that possibility. So, part of why I wanted to talk about this is if there is any ramifications from this on U.S. citizens, it's going to affect people, and maybe it might be politically leaned one way when one group's in office, and then politically leaned the other way when the other is in office. But we can combat this ourselves by being as honest as possible. I don't hide that I follow Tim Pool and all that, and they're what I wouldn't hold them as a on a pillar or as the virtue of media, but of citizen media. I think they are one of the better people that try to be as honest and unbiased as possible. They do have their biases. They will admit it. Then you have groups like the Babylon Bee and the Duffel Blog that are satirical, and they fully admit to being satirical. And that's honest media, in my opinion. Whether you agree with the message or not, they're being honest with, hey, we are trying to just provide a laugh. We're not meant to be taken seriously. And I think that's not, some could argue that's trying to be disinformation. It's not. It's just meant to be humor. It's meant to be fun. But then you get people who, like Without a Crystal Ball, Katie Joy Paulson, who makes her living on YouTube talking about tea, or she talks about like the TLC channel shows, the Duggars and Chris Lee and all these reality TV shows. And I don't know the status of any of the cases right now, but I know that she was at one point being sued by Chris Lee, and I know she was being sued by Stephen McRae for, defamation. And that's a risk that if you're gonna try and be that type of media personality, you have to be willing to deal with. The other is you have people like Unirock, who spend hours playing video games but talking about commentary here, in the sense that if he says something that irritates people, it's a joke, didn't mean anything by it, and that his people know it's a joke, whatever. Or he'll talk about you behind blocks and things like that. And those types of people, while I don't agree with what they're doing, they have the right to do it. They have the fundamental First Amendment right to do it. They just have to be willing to pay the consequences when the time comes. Someday, people are going to say the wrong thing about somebody, and they could get sued for defamation and libel and slander if they, depending on how they present the media. And it's not the government's position, it's not the government's right, let alone position, to be policing that. The government has no business, unless in a time of war, which, oh yeah, we're not in war anymore. Come on now, guys. There is no reason for this governance board. There's no reason for us to have anything to do with the government. The government should not be trying to tell me what is truth and what is not. The government has no right to try and tell you, your family, or anybody else what is correct information. We need to be educated to go and look through the things ourselves. We need to know where our biases lie and be able to identify them. Be like, hey, just because this was said on Fox News doesn't mean it's not right. Hey, just because this was said on MSNBC by Rachel Maddow doesn't mean it's not right. Doesn't mean it's not correct information. That's where the disconnect is with people. And that's where a lot of people are willing to let something like this slide. They're willing to let this disinformation governance board exist because I don't want to have to do the work. I don't want to have to deal with having to understand what it is that I should be looking into with media. There's a famous quote by, I want to say it's Walter Mondale, about how the media has always been liberal and or has a left lean to it. And for the most part, I could agree with that. But at the same time, that doesn't negate that whether you're a professional journalist, like the title of this says, or whether you are just a citizen journalist. And I don't really consider myself a citizen journalist. I consider myself a member of the media community because I have a degree in public relations. I am a member of the professional society, the Society of Professional, the PRSA, the Public Relations Society of America. That's what I'm trying to think of. I'm trying to combine like so many different acronyms together. But that being said, journalism is about seeking the truth and reporting it, not making up stories, not just trying to be like, here, let me throw this on the wall and see what sticks. Journalists should seek truth and report. Ethical journalism should be accurate and fair. Journalists should be honest and courageous in gathering, reporting, and interpreting information. Journalists should take responsibility for the accuracy of their work, verify information before releasing it, use original sources when possible. Remember that neither speed nor format excuses inaccuracies. Provide the context. Don't just give a quote out of context. Make sure that you're not misrepresenting or oversimplifying in promoting, previewing, or summarizing a story. Don't be fucking clickbait. Gather, update, and correct information throughout the life of the news story. If you get something wrong, like I was listening to Alison Morrow talking today about the Washington Post doing a story on another former journal. I say former in the fact that he used to be corporate media, like your mainstream media, big corporations. Now runs his own podcast and everything. And the Washington Post reached out for comment at 2 a.m. Eastern time by emailing the producer of the guy's show rather than contacting the actual guy for comment himself. If you make something wrong, own it. Update and say, hey, we did this wrong. Or, hey, I, as the reporter, did this wrong and I'm asking for the update and the correction, the retraction if needed, whatever. Be cautious when making promises, but keep the promises they make. So if you promise to have a story done by such and such time, try your best to make that promise. However, be as the person receiving the editor receiving the story, be knowledgeable that, hey, maybe something comes up. Hey, I've got a bigger nugget that I got to break down here on this. And the 24-hour news cycle is kind of the biggest problem with journalistic integrity and ethics today, I think. We're so worried about getting, when I say we, and speaking journalism in general, we are so worried about getting the story done first rather than actually getting it done accurately. Identify sources clearly. Make sure that you gather as much information as possible. Considering sources' motives before promising anonymity. Reserve anonymity for sources who may face danger, retribution, or other harm, and have information that cannot be tamed elsewhere. Explain why the anonymity was granted. So, and this is just some of it. I will link this website in the description. But, when you're providing a source with anonymity, make sure that there's a valid reason why. Deep Throat was anonymous because of who he was in the Nixon administration. That could have caused some serious harm to him. And the whole point of being a journalist is to not do harm unless absolutely necessary. And sometimes, you know what? Whistleblowers need that protection. That being said, that doesn't mean that you just blatantly go and say, hey, I have to have this done by 5 a.m. I'm going to email you at 2 in the morning and you don't respond to me by 3 and be like, oh, no comment. That's bullshit. That is downright deceptive practices. We need to stop having the 24-hour news cycle be the dictator of, hey, I heard this, so let's report on it. Hey, let's do some digging. And if it takes us a week to dig through and make sure we get the story right, then let's get the story right. That way we have less time spending doing retractions and corrections. And part of the reason why I showed this is simply because there are people that don't abide by this in their philosophy for making content, for making videos about other people, making videos about topics, They don't care about accuracy. They care about just getting the views, getting the clicks. This is where I just have my biggest issue. The other main areas for the ethical work of professional journalism: minimize harm, act independently, don't allow your biases and things like that to do it. Be accountable and transparent. That means being responsible for what you've said. This is probably one of the best, I think, ethical policies for any profession. And we should hold it. We should hold as many people that want to be professional to account to these standards. So, let's see. How much does it cost to join while I'm here? Oh, yeah, I'm not going to do that right now. Let's see. Why join? Do tell me. Let's see. Trying to find it. Sometimes they'll post their fees. Sometimes they won't. No. $20 a year. Sweet. Oh, here we go. That's what I was looking for. Professional, $75 for a year. Lifetime for the 1,000. Local chapter dues not included. and then associate, a supporter. So if you like what they do, anyways, I digress. This is a long enough video as it is, but ultimately, if you are serious about your First Amendment rights to freedom of speech and the freedom of press, then you should oppose anything the government does that is to curtail your speech, whether it's political speech, whether it's medical speech, whether it's just your opinion on something. You have the right as a citizen of the United States to talk shit about anyone and everyone. You can't call violence against them. You can't do, harmful things to them. But you can sit there and say, President Joe Biden is a lying piece of shit. Donald Trump is a lazy ass motherfucking piece of shit. You can say whatever the fuck you want about Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, Josh Hawley, Tim Pool, myself. These are things that are allowed, and it should not be infringed upon by the government, especially under the guise of preventing disinformation in elections. So with that, I have launched a new website. It is going to be where I post links to the videos here, but also written work as well, blogs, where I'm going to cover stories that I want. And it's not just going to be the Thoughts by Jay Brown media here. It will also be my sports desk. I still haven't come up with a name for that one yet, but basically my sports talk stuff, and also my some of my travel stuff. So if you want to support this channel, I will be posting a subscribe star link that will say Thoughts by Jay Brown, but it is going towards more of the jbrownmedia.com stuff. The other thing is, if you are looking for vacation or travel, please hit me up at jay@hopskipsanddream.com, where I can help you with your travel needs. My tagline is changing. I still go with the memories begin here, but I'm going to come up with something a little better. But ultimately, what I would like to do is be able to talk about not just politics, not just the news, not just sports, but also travel things, openly. And you know what? Screw all my haters. I don't care. We're going to work on this, because I really think that silencing yourself because you're afraid of others is counterintuitive to the free speech that I advocate for. So with that, like I said, subscribe, make sure you hit the bell notification if you want to see all of the upcoming content, and make sure to like my other channels if you're interested in sports. If you're interested in gaming, check out my Twitch and my gaming YouTube channels. And like I said, traveling, check me out over at Hop, Skip, and a Dream. With that, peace.